Sarah stood at the end of the long, overgrown driveway. The house loomed before her, a dark silhouette against the pale sky. It had been 10 years since she'd last seen it, 10 years since the fire. 10 years since her family. She was older now, 22, but the memories clung to her like cobwebs. Happy memories, mostly. Christmases with mountains of presents, summer barbecues in the backyard, her dad teaching her to ride her bike on the very driveway she stood on now. And Michael, her mischievous, ever-smiling little brother. But then, the memories shifted, turning dark and twisted. The smell of smoke, the frantic shouts, the blinding orange flames. The faces of the firefighters, grim and pitying. The unbearable silence that followed. Sarah had tried to move on. Foster homes, boarding school, a small apartment in the city. But the house, the memory of her family, always tugged at her, a persistent ache in her heart. She needed closure. She needed to understand. Taking a deep breath, Sarah pushed open the rusted gate and started walking. The gravel crunched under her boots, the only sound in the eerie silence. The house seemed to watch her, its empty windows like vacant eyes. She remembered painting those windows with Michael one Halloween. He'd insisted on a goofy ghost with a crooked smile. She smiled sadly at the memory. As she reached the porch, she noticed the swing set in the backyard, rusted and overgrown with weeds. Her dad had built that for her and Michael. Hours they spent soaring through the air, laughing and carefree. A sudden gust of wind swept through the trees, carrying with it the faint scent of wood smoke. Sarah shivered, pulling her jacket tighter around her. It was just the wind, she told herself. Just the memories. She reached for the front door, the wood warped and cracked. The doorknob was cold beneath her fingers. This was it. There was no turning back now. With a deep breath, Sarah pushed the door open and stepped inside. The air was thick with dust and the smell of decay. Sunlight streamed through the grimy windows, illuminating the empty rooms. This was her home. Or, at least, what was left of it. The living room was almost exactly as she remembered it, only faded and worn. The floral wallpaper was peeling in the corners, and the once bright rug was now covered in dust. She could almost see her mom sitting in her favorite armchair, reading a book, her dad tinkering with his model airplanes on the coffee table, Michael sprawled on the floor, building a Lego castle. A lump formed in Sarah's throat. She walked over to the fireplace, running her hand along the cold, soot-stained bricks. This was where they used to hang their stockings at Christmas. She could almost hear Michael's excited squeals as he ripped open his presents. She wandered into the kitchen. The cabinets were bare, the countertops covered in a thick layer of grime. The refrigerator stood silent and empty, a stark reminder of the life that had once filled this house. She remembered helping her mom bake cookies here, the sweet smell of vanilla filling the air. Michael would always sneak a taste of the dough when Mom wasn't looking. Each room held a ghost of a memory, a whisper of a life that was gone. Sarah felt a strange mix of sadness and comfort. It was painful to remember, but it was also a way of keeping them alive, of refusing to let them fade away completely. She climbed the creaking stairs, her heart pounding in her chest. The upstairs hallway was dark and narrow, the air even colder than downstairs. She passed her parents' bedroom, the doors slightly ajar. She didn't dare to look inside. She stopped in front of Michael's room. His name was still painted on the door in bright blue letters. She reached out and gently pushed the door open. The room was small and cluttered, just as she remembered. Toys were scattered on the floor, books lined the shelves, and posters of superheroes adorned the walls. It was like stepping back in time. Sarah walked over to the window, looking out at the backyard. She could almost see Michael running around, chasing butterflies, his laughter echoing through the air. Suddenly, a cold breeze swept through the room, causing the posters on the wall to flutter. Sarah shivered, pulling her jacket tighter. The air felt heavy, charged with an unseen energy. She wasn't alone. A shiver ran down Sarah's spine. She scanned the room, her eyes darting from one shadow to another. The air grew colder, and the faint scent of wood smoke intensified. It wasn't just her imagination. Something was definitely here. A floorboard creaked behind her. Sarah whirled around, her heart pounding in her chest. The room was empty. She took a shaky breath, trying to calm herself. It was just the house settling, she told herself. Old houses made noises. But then, she saw it. A faint, shimmering outline near the window. It was barely visible, like a heat haze on a summer day, but it was there. It flickered and danced, taking on a vaguely human shape. Sarah gasped, stumbling backward. She pressed herself against the doorframe, her eyes wide with fear and disbelief. She wanted to run, to scream, but she was frozen in place, paralyzed by terror. The shimmering outline grew stronger, becoming more defined. It solidified into the form of a young boy, no older than 8 or 9. He had messy brown hair, bright blue eyes, and a mischievous grin on his face. Michael. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. It couldn't be. Michael was gone. He was. But there he was, standing in front of her, as real as she was. His eyes were filled with a mixture of confusion and curiosity. He tilted his head, studying her with a puzzled expression. "Sarah," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Is that you?" Tears streamed down Sarah's face. She couldn't speak. She could only nod, her body trembling with emotion. Michael took a step closer, his eyes widening in recognition. "Wow," he said, his voice filled with wonder. "You're all grown up." Sarah finally found her voice, though it was barely a whisper. "Michael," she said, her voice choked with tears. "Is it really you?" He grinned, his eyes sparkling with mischief. "Of course, it's me. Who else would it be?" Sarah rushed forward, throwing her arms around him. She expected to feel nothing, to pass right through him, but she felt his arms wrap around her in return. His touch was cold, like ice, but it was real. "Oh, Michael," she sobbed, burying her face in his shoulder. "I've missed you so much." He hugged her tightly, his small body shaking with emotion. "I've missed you too, Sarah," he said, his voice filled with sadness. "I've been waiting for you." After a long moment, Sarah pulled back, wiping the tears from her eyes. She looked at Michael, really looked at him. He was exactly as she remembered him, frozen in time. He was still her little brother, even if he was a ghost. "Michael," she said, her voice trembling. How is this possible? Are you a ghost?" Michael shrugged. "I guess so," he said, looking around the room with a puzzled expression. "I don't really understand it. I've been here. Ever since, you know." Sarah nodded, her heart aching. She knew. Ever since the fire. "Do you remember what happened, Michael?" she asked gently. He frowned, his brow furrowing. "I remember, smoke. And fire. And being scared. But, it's all blurry." Sarah took his hand, his cold fingers sending a shiver down her spine. "It's okay, Michael," she said softly. "You don't have to remember." "But, why are you here, Sarah?" he asked, his eyes filled with curiosity. "Have you come to stay with me?" Sarah's heart broke. She wished she could stay with him, forever. But she knew she couldn't. She had a life to live, a future to build. And Michael. Michael was stuck here, trapped in this house, reliving the same nightmare over and over again. "I came to visit, Michael," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I wanted to see you again. I wanted to understand." Michael looked at her, his eyes filled with a sadness that belied his young age. "Understand what?" "Why you're still here," Sarah said, her voice barely a whisper. Why you can't move on? Michael shrugged again. I don't know, he said. I can't leave. It's like something is holding me here. Sarah felt a surge of determination. She didn't know how, but she was going to help him. She was going to find a way to free him from this prison, to let him finally rest in peace. We'll figure it out, Michael, she said, squeezing his hand. I promise. We'll figure out how to set you free. A faint smile touched Michael's lips. Really? He said, his eyes sparkling with hope. Really, Sarah said, her voice filled with conviction. I won't leave you here, Michael. I promise. Sarah spent the next few hours talking to Michael, trying to piece together his experience, trying to understand what kept him tethered to the house. He remembered snippets of his life before the fire, playing in the backyard, watching cartoons on TV, his mom reading him bedtime stories. But the fire itself was a blur, a terrifying nightmare he couldn't fully recall. He didn't understand that he was dead, not really. He knew he was different, that he couldn't leave the house, that people couldn't see him. But he didn't grasp the finality of it all. He was still waiting for his parents to come home, still expecting life to go back to normal. Sarah realized that Michael's innocence, his inability to fully comprehend his situation, was part of what kept him trapped. He was clinging to the hope of a life that was no longer possible. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the room, Sarah felt a growing sense of urgency. She knew she couldn't stay here forever. She had to find a way to help Michael before it was too late. But how? She started searching the room, hoping to find some clue, some object that might shed light on Michael's predicament. She looked through his books, his toys, his old school papers. But everything seemed ordinary, untouched by the tragedy that had befallen them. Then, she noticed something tucked away in the back of his closet. It was a small, wooden box, intricately carved with symbols she didn't recognize. She pulled it out, her heart pounding in her chest. Could this be the key? She opened the box, her fingers trembling. Inside, she found a collection of strange objects, a dried flower, a piece of charcoal, a small, tarnished silver locket. And underneath it all, a folded piece of paper. Sarah unfolded the paper, her eyes scanning the faded writing. It was a handwritten note, penned in her mother's familiar script. As she read the words, a chill ran down her spine. The note spoke of an old family legend, a ritual that could bind a spirit to a place, or release it. The ritual required a sacrifice, the note explained. Someone willing to take the spirit's place, to become tethered to the house in their stead. Sarah's blood ran cold. Could this be the answer? Was this the only way to free Michael? The thought was terrifying, unbearable. But as she looked at Michael, his eyes filled with hope and longing, she knew she had to consider it. She had to be willing to do anything to save her brother, even if it meant sacrificing her own future. But could she really go through with it? Could she condemn herself to a life of eternal imprisonment in this haunted house? The choice was impossible, a Sophie's choice of the supernatural. But Sarah knew, deep down, that she had to try. For Michael. For her family. For the chance to finally find peace. Sarah carefully folded the note and placed it back in the box. She couldn't let Michael see it, not yet. The implications were too much for him to bear. She needed to process it herself first, to decide what to do. She looked at Michael, who was sitting on the edge of his bed, swinging his legs back and forth. He was humming a familiar tune, a song their mother used to sing to them. He seemed so innocent, so unaware of the burden she now carried. Michael, she said softly, I need to go downstairs for a little while. I need to think. He looked up at her, his eyes filled with concern. Are you okay, Sarah? He asked. You seem sad. Sarah forced a smile. I'm fine, Michael, she said. I just need some time alone. I'll be back soon, I promise. She left the room, closing the door softly behind her. She leaned against the doorframe, taking a deep breath. She felt like she was suffocating, trapped between her love for her brother and her fear of sacrificing her own life. She went downstairs to the living room, sinking into the worn armchair that her mother used to love. The room was filled with shadows, the setting sun casting an eerie glow on the dust-covered furniture. Sarah closed her eyes, trying to clear her head. She reread the note in her mind, trying to understand the ritual, trying to find a loophole, a way to save Michael without sacrificing herself. But the note was clear. The ritual required a willing sacrifice, someone to take the spirit's place, to become bound to the house. There was no other way. Sarah opened her eyes, her gaze falling on the fireplace. She remembered Christmases past, the warmth of the fire, the joy of being together as a family. Now, all that was left was ashes and memories. She stood up, walking over to the fireplace. She ran her hand along the cold, soot-stained bricks. She thought of her parents, of their love, of their sacrifices. They had given everything for her and Michael. Now, it was her turn to give something back. She made her decision. She would do it. She would sacrifice herself to save Michael. It was the only way. But first, she needed to talk to him. She needed to explain the situation, to prepare him for what was to come. She knew it would be difficult, that he might not understand. But she owed it to him to be honest, to give him a choice, even if the choice was ultimately hers to make. She took another deep breath and walked back upstairs, her heart filled with a mixture of fear and determination. It was time to tell Michael the truth. It was time to face the impossible choice together. She opened the door to Michael's room, ready to begin the most difficult conversation of her life. Michael looked up as Sarah entered, his bright blue eyes full of innocent curiosity. He was playing with his old toy cars, making engine noises and crashing them into each other. It was a scene frozen in time, a snapshot of a life that had been cruelly cut short. Sarah sat down on the bed beside him, taking a deep breath. "Michael," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "we need to talk about something important." He stopped playing with his cars and looked at her, his brow furrowing. "What is it, Sarah?" he asked. "Are you leaving already?" Sarah's heart ached. "No, Michael," she said softly. "I'm not leaving yet. But I found something. Something that might help you." She hesitated, unsure how to explain it. "Remember how I said I wanted to understand why you're still here, why you can't leave the house?" Michael nodded. "Yeah," he said. "It's like something is holding me back. I don't know what it is." "Well," Sarah continued, "I found a note, written by Mom. It talks about an old family legend, a ritual that can release a spirit that's trapped." Michael's eyes widened. "Really?" he said, his voice filled with hope. "Does that mean I can leave? Does that mean I can be with Mom and Dad again?" Sarah's heart broke. She couldn't bring herself to tell him the whole truth, not yet. "It might," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "But there's a catch." Michael frowned. "A catch? What kind of catch?" Sarah took his hand, her fingers intertwining with his cold ones. "The ritual, it requires a sacrifice. Someone has to take the spirit's place, to become bound to the house instead." Michael looked confused. "What do you mean?" he asked. "Who would do that?" Sarah swallowed hard, her eyes filling with tears. I would, Michael," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I would take your place." Michael stared at her, his face a mask of disbelief. "No, Sarah," he exclaimed. "You can't do that. You have to leave. You have to live your life." Sarah squeezed his hand, her tears flowing freely now. "I know, Michael," she said. "But I can't leave you here. I can't let you be trapped in this house forever. You deserve to be free, to be at peace." Michael shook his head, his eyes filled with tears as well. But I don't want you to be trapped here either, he cried. I want you to be happy. I want you to have a life. Sarah pulled him close, hugging him tightly. I will be happy, Michael, she said, her voice choked with emotion. Knowing that you're free, that you're finally at peace, that will be enough for me. Michael clung to her, sobbing uncontrollably. I don't want you to do this, Sarah, he cried. Please don't do this. Sarah held him close, stroking his hair, trying to comfort him. She knew it was an impossible situation, a terrible choice. But she also knew that it was the right thing to do. She couldn't let her brother suffer any longer. She had to set him free, even if it meant sacrificing everything. It's okay, Michael, she whispered, her voice filled with love and determination. Everything is going to be okay. But deep down, Sarah knew that nothing would ever be the same again. For what felt like hours, Sarah and Michael clung to each other, their tears mingling, their hearts breaking. Michael couldn't understand why Sarah would do this for him, why she would give up her life to save him. He didn't want to be free if it meant she had to suffer. But Sarah was resolute. She explained to him, as best she could, that she couldn't live with herself if she left him trapped in this house. She told him that she loved him more than anything in the world, and that his happiness was worth more than her own. Finally, Michael began to understand. He saw the determination in Sarah's eyes, the unwavering love in her heart. He realized that she had made up her mind, and that there was no changing it. With a heavy heart, he agreed to let her go through with the ritual. But he made her promise him one thing, that she would live her life to the fullest, that she would find happiness, that she would never forget him. Sarah promised, her voice choked with emotion. She vowed to honor his memory by living a life filled with love, joy, and purpose. She would make him proud. As the night wore on, Sarah began to prepare for the ritual. She reread the note, carefully studying the instructions. She gathered the objects from the wooden box, the dried flower, the piece of charcoal, the silver locket. She led Michael downstairs to the living room, where the fire had started so many years ago. The room felt heavy with sorrow, the air thick with the ghosts of the past. Sarah placed the objects on the floor in a circle, following the instructions in the note. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart. She knew that what she was about to do would change her life forever. She looked at Michael, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and gratitude. She smiled at him, trying to reassure him that everything would be okay. Are you ready, Michael? She asked softly. He nodded, his small body trembling. I'm ready, Sarah, he said. Thank you. Sarah knelt down in the center of the circle, closing her eyes. She began to chant the words from the note, her voice barely audible at first, but growing stronger with each repetition. As she chanted, the air in the room began to shimmer. A cold breeze swept through the house, extinguishing the shadows and filling the room with an eerie light. Sarah felt a strange energy coursing through her body, a tingling sensation that made her skin crawl. She knew that the ritual was working. She knew that she was about to change places with Michael, to become bound to the house in his stead. She opened her eyes, looking at Michael one last time. She saw his face bathed in the ethereal light, his eyes filled with love and gratitude. Goodbye, Michael, she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. I love you. And then, everything went black. Sarah gasped, her eyes snapping open. She was lying on the floor, the circle of objects still surrounding her. But something was different. The air felt lighter, cleaner. The oppressive weight that had hung over the house for so long had lifted. She sat up, looking around the room. It was still the same dilapidated living room, but it felt different. Peaceful. She stood up, her legs feeling weak and unsteady. She looked around, searching for Michael. But he was gone. A wave of panic washed over her. Had the ritual worked? Had she traded places with him, only to be trapped in this house forever? She ran to the window, peering out into the darkness. The swing set in the backyard swayed gently in the breeze, a silent reminder of happier times. She tried to open the window, but it was stuck. She pushed harder, her heart pounding in her chest. Finally, with a loud creak, it swung open. She leaned out the window, taking a deep breath of the fresh night air. It felt good. It felt like freedom. A sudden realization dawned on her. She wasn't trapped. She was free. She didn't understand how it was possible, but somehow, the ritual had worked. Michael was gone, released from his earthly bonds. And she was free to leave as well. But as she turned away from the window, a wave of sadness washed over her. Michael was gone. She would never see him again. She would never hear his laughter, never feel his touch. She was alone. She walked to the front door, her hand trembling as she reached for the doorknob. She hesitated for a moment, looking back at the living room, at the circle of objects on the floor, at the memories that lingered in the air. This house had been her prison for so long, a constant reminder of the tragedy that had befallen her family. But it had also been a place of love, of laughter, of happiness. It was where she had grown up, where she had shared so many precious moments with her parents and her brother. Now, it was time to say goodbye. She opened the door and stepped out into the night. The cool air washed over her face, cleansing her soul. She took a deep breath, filling her lungs with the scent of freedom. She walked down the porch steps, her feet crunching on the gravel driveway. She didn't look back. As she reached the gate, she paused for a moment, turning to face the house one last time. She saw it silhouetted against the night sky, a dark and foreboding presence. But it no longer held any power over her. It was just a house, a building filled with memories. It was no longer her prison. She turned away and walked through the gate, leaving the house behind her forever. As she walked down the long, overgrown driveway, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. She was alone, but she was not broken. She was scarred, but she was not defeated. She was free. She knew that the pain of losing her family would never truly go away. But she also knew that she could continue to live a life filled with purpose and love. She would carry his memory with her always, a shining beacon in the darkness. Years passed. Sarah moved back to the city, found a small apartment, and enrolled in college. She studied hard, determined to make something of her life. She made new friends, laughed, and even, eventually, fell in love. But she never forgot Michael. Every year, on the anniversary of the fire, she would visit his grave, leaving flowers and sharing stories about her life. She told him about her successes, her failures, her dreams. She knew he was listening, watching over her from somewhere beyond. One day, she decided to visit the old house again. It had been years since she had last seen it. She wondered what it looked like now, if it had changed. As she drove down the familiar road, she felt a sense of trepidation. She wasn't sure if she was ready to face the memories that still lingered there. When she reached the house, she was surprised to see that it had been torn down. All that was left was an empty field, overgrown with weeds. At first, she felt a pang of sadness. The house was gone, erased from the landscape. But then, she realized that it didn't matter. The memories were still there, etched in her heart, forever a part of who she was. She walked into the field, standing where the house had once stood. She closed her eyes, imagining her family, their laughter, their love. She smiled, a single tear rolling down her cheek. But it wasn't a tear of sadness. It was a tear of peace, of acceptance, of love. She knew that her family would always be with her, in her heart, in her memories. And she knew that she would never truly be alone. The end. Alternative ending, focus on the forever changed aspect, rolling down her cheek. She knew the joy she found would always be tinged with sadness, the laughter always a little quieter, the love always aware of the empty space beside her. The world stretched before her, full of possibilities, but she would always carry the weight of her sacrifice, the echo of Michael's laughter, the ghost of her family's love in the empty rooms of her heart. She was alive, she was free, but she was forever changed. Alternative ending, a darker note, rolling down her cheek. The peace she felt was fragile, a thin veneer over a deep well of grief. She knew the memories would haunt her forever, that the house, even in its absence, would always be a part of her. She was free, but at what cost? She had traded her future for her brother's peace, and now she was left to navigate a world that felt both familiar and alien, forever marked by the sacrifice she had made. The emptiness stretched before her, a vast and echoing silence, and she knew, with a chilling certainty, that she would never truly escape the ghost of that house, the ghost of her brother, the ghost of who she used to be. She walked away, a survivor, but also a prisoner, bound to the past by a love that had demanded everything. Alternative ending, ambiguous, rolling down her cheek. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she knew that she would face it with courage and hope. She knew that her journey was far from over, but she was ready to face whatever the future held, knowing that she was strong, she was resilient, and she was loved. The end. Okay, let's rewind a little and explore more of the ritual moment itself as described in Key Point 11. Sarah knelt in the circle, the ancient words of the ritual flowing from her lips. The air crackled with energy, a visible shimmer distorting the already decaying room. The scent of wood smoke intensified, swirling around her like a suffocating embrace. She focused on Michael, pouring all her love, all her memories, all her hopes for his future into the chanting. She remembered teaching him to ride his bike, reading him bedtime stories, comforting him when he was scared. These memories, these feelings, were the fuel of the ritual, the power that would break the chains that bound him. Suddenly, a surge of energy ripped through her, a searing pain that threatened to overwhelm her. She gasped, her body convulsing, but she held on, clinging to the image of Michael's smiling face. She looked at him. He was fading. His form was becoming translucent, the edges blurring, as if he were dissolving into the air. But as he faded, a look of peace settled on his face, a serenity she had never seen before. He smiled at her, a genuine, heartfelt smile that reached all the way to his eyes. "Thank you, Sarah," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the chanting. "I'm free." As he spoke, Sarah felt a pull, a strange, irresistible force drawing her towards the house, towards the floor beneath her. It was as if the house itself were alive, reaching out to claim her, to bind her to its walls. Fear threatened to overwhelm her, but she fought it down. She had made a promise to Michael, and she wouldn't break it, not even now. She closed her eyes, surrendering to the pull, accepting her fate. She felt herself sinking, falling, as if she were being swallowed whole by the house. The chanting grew louder, the energy more intense. She felt a searing pain in her chest, a feeling of being ripped apart, of losing herself. And then, everything went silent. The chanting stopped. The energy dissipated. The pain vanished. Sarah opened her eyes. She was still kneeling in the circle, but the room was different. The air was still, silent, empty. Michael was gone. She was alone. But was she trapped? Was she bound to this house, a prisoner of her own sacrifice? Or was there something more at play? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain, her life would never be the same. She stood, her legs trembling, and took a step towards the door. Let's rewind just a bit to focus specifically on Michael's farewell during the ritual. She looked at him. He was fading faster now, his form flickering like a dying candle. But as he faded, a change came over his face. The confusion and fear that had haunted his eyes for so long vanished, replaced by understanding and acceptance. He understood now. He understood the sacrifice Sarah was making for him. He understood the depth of her love. He reached out to her, his translucent hand barely visible. Sarah took it, her fingers intertwining with his cold, fading ones. "Thank you, Sarah," he whispered, his voice filled with gratitude. "I understand now. You're setting me free." Tears streamed down Sarah's face. She nodded, unable to speak. Michael smiled, a radiant, joyful smile that lit up the room. "I'm not scared anymore," he said. "I'm going home." He looked past her, his eyes fixed on something she couldn't see. "Mom. Dad," he whispered, his voice filled with wonder. "Is that you?" His smile widened. "I'm coming." Then, he turned back to Sarah, his eyes filled with love. "Goodbye, Sarah," he said. "I'll always be with you. Don't be sad. Be happy. Live your life. And never forget me." He squeezed her hand one last time, his touch growing fainter with each passing second. And then, he was gone. He vanished completely, dissolving into the air, leaving behind only the faint scent of wood smoke and the echo of his laughter. Sarah knelt in the circle, her heart aching with grief. She had lost her brother, again. But this time, it was different. This time, he was at peace. This time, he was free. She closed her eyes, whispering a prayer for his soul. She hoped he was with their parents now, finally reunited after all these years. She hoped he was happy. She knew she would never forget him. She would carry his memory with her always, a reminder of the love they had shared, the sacrifice she had made, and the promise she had made to live her life to the fullest. She opened her eyes, her gaze fixed on the empty space where Michael had stood just moments before. "Goodbye, Michael," she whispered, her voice filled with love and sorrow. "I'll see you again someday." Then, she stood, her legs trembling, and took a step towards the door, ready to face whatever the future held, knowing that she was alone, but not broken. She was free. And so was he. Now, transitioning back to the main narrative, she took a tentative step towards the doorway, expecting to feel the invisible barrier, the force that would hold her captive within the walls of the house. But there was nothing. She took another step, and another, moving further away from the circle, further away from the center of the house. Still nothing. A wave of disbelief washed over her. She wasn't trapped. She was free. She didn't understand how it was possible. The note had been so clear, the ritual so specific. Someone had to take Michael's place. Someone had to be bound to the house. But somehow, the rules had changed. Somehow, Michael's peace, his release, had freed her as well. It was as if the negativity that had clung to the house for so long, the sorrow and the pain, had finally been purged, leaving nothing behind but emptiness. And in that emptiness, there was freedom. She walked through the doorway and into the hallway, her heart pounding in her chest. She moved towards the front door, her hand trembling as she reached for the knob. She hesitated for a moment, looking back at the living room, at the circle of objects on the floor, at the memories that still lingered in the air. This house had been her prison for so long, a constant reminder of the tragedy that had befallen her family. But it had also been a place of love, of laughter, of happiness. It was where she had grown up, where she had shared so many precious moments with her parents and her brother. Now, it was time to say goodbye. She opened the door and stepped out into the night. The cool air washed over her face, cleansing her soul. She took a deep breath, filling her lungs with the scent of freedom. She walked down the porch steps, her feet crunching on the gravel driveway. She didn't look back. As she reached the gate, she paused for a moment, turning to face the house one last time. She saw it silhouetted against the night sky, a dark and foreboding presence. But it no longer held any power over her. It was just a house, a building filled with memories. It was no longer her prison. She turned away and walked through the gate, leaving the house behind her forever. As she walked down the long, overgrown driveway, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. She was alone, but she was not broken. She was scarred, but she was not defeated. She was free. She knew that the pain of losing her family would never truly go away. But she also knew that she could carry their memory with her, honoring their lives by living her own to the fullest. She walked on, into the darkness, towards an uncertain future, but with a newfound sense of hope in her heart. The end. Alternative version focusing on the forever changed aspect. She took a tentative step towards the doorway, expecting to feel the invisible barrier, the force that would hold her captive within the walls of the house. But there was nothing. She took another step, and another, moving further away from the circle, further away from the center of the house. Still nothing. A wave of disbelief washed over her. She wasn't trapped. She was free. But the freedom felt different. It wasn't the carefree freedom she had known before the fire. It was a heavy freedom, burdened by the weight of her sacrifice, by the memory of Michael's fading smile, by the absence of her family. She had escaped the house, but she hadn't escaped the past. It would always be with her, a part of who she was, shaping her choices, influencing her dreams. She walked through the doorway and into the hallway, her heart filled with a mixture of relief and sorrow. She moved towards the front door, her hand trembling as she reached for the knob. She hesitated for a moment, looking back at the living room, at the circle of objects on the floor, at the memories that still lingered in the air. This house would always be a part of her, a reminder of the love she had lost, the sacrifice she had made, and the person she had become. She opened the door and stepped out into the night. The cool air washed over her face, cleansing her soul. She took a deep breath, filling her lungs with the scent of freedom, but also with the scent of wood smoke, a constant reminder of the fire that had changed her life forever. She walked down the porch steps, her feet crunching on the gravel driveway. She didn't look back. As she reached the gate, she paused for a moment, turning to face the house one last time. She saw it silhouetted against the night sky, a dark and foreboding presence. But it no longer held her captive. She was free to leave, to move on, to build a new life. But she knew that she would never truly escape the past. She was forever changed, forever marked by the events that had unfolded within those walls. She turned away and walked through the gate, leaving the house behind her forever, but carrying its memory with her always. As she walked down the long, overgrown driveway, she felt a sense of peace, but also a sense of loss. She was alone, but she was not broken. She was scarred, but she was not defeated. She was free, but she was forever changed. She walked on, into the darkness, towards an uncertain future, carrying the weight of her past, but also the hope of a brighter tomorrow. The end. And as she walked away, she knew that she would never truly be alone. Michael would always be with her, a guardian angel watching over her, guiding her through life. And she would always honor his memory by living a life filled with love, joy, and purpose. She continued walking, further and further away from the house, further and further away from the past. But as she walked, she began to notice something strange. The air seemed to shimmer around her, as if she were surrounded by an invisible force field. And the world around her seemed brighter, more vibrant, more alive. She looked up at the sky. The stars were shining brightly, twinkling like diamonds in the darkness. She had never seen them so clearly before. She looked around at the trees, their leaves rustling gently in the breeze. They seemed to be whispering secrets to her, telling her stories of the past, present, and future. She felt a sense of connection to the world around her, a feeling of being part of something larger than herself. It was as if Michael's release had not only freed her from the house, but had also opened her eyes to the beauty and wonder of the universe. She walked on, her steps lighter, her heart filled with hope. She knew that the road ahead would not be easy. She knew that there would be challenges and obstacles to overcome. But she also knew that she was not alone. She had the strength of her family's love to guide her, the memory of Michael's sacrifice to inspire her, and the newfound freedom to embrace whatever the future held. She walked on, into the darkness, towards the dawn of a new day, forever changed, but forever grateful. The end. Alternative ending, focusing on the weight she carries. And as she walked away, she knew that she would never truly escape the weight of her sacrifice. Michael would always be with her, a constant reminder of what she had given up. And she would always wonder if she had made the right choice. She continued walking, further and further away from the house, further and further away from the past. But as she walked, she felt a growing sense of emptiness, a void in her heart that could never be filled. She looked up at the sky. The stars seemed cold and distant, offering no comfort, no guidance. She looked around at the trees, their leaves rustling gently in the breeze. They seemed to be whispering secrets to her, telling her that she was not alone, that her family was still with her, in spirit, if not in body. She stopped at the gate, turning to look back at the house one last time. It stood silhouetted against the night sky, a dark and imposing figure. But it no longer held any fear for her. It was just a house, a building filled with memories, both good and bad. A single tear rolled down her cheek, a tear of sorrow, but also a tear of relief, of gratitude, of hope. She knew that the pain of losing her family would never truly go away. But she also knew that she could carry their memory with her, honoring their lives by living her own to the fullest. She smiled, a small, fragile smile, but a smile nonetheless. She knew that she could finally move forward, leaving the past behind her, embracing the future with courage and hope. She turned away from the house and walked through the gate, stepping out into the darkness, ready to face whatever the future held. She was alone, but she was not broken. She was scarred, but she was not defeated. She was free. And she would never forget. The end. Alternative ending, focus on the ambiguity, gently in the breeze. They seemed to be whispering secrets, but she couldn't quite decipher them. Were they warnings? Promises? She didn't know. She stopped at the gate, turning to look back at the house one last time. It stood silhouetted against the night sky, a dark and imposing figure. It was silent, still, watching. A single tear rolled down her cheek. Was it a tear of sorrow? Of relief? Of fear? She couldn't be sure. The emotions were too complex, too intertwined. She knew that she had changed, that she would never be the same person she had been before she entered that house. But she didn't know what kind of person she had become. Was she stronger? Weaker? Wiser? More broken? She didn't know. She smiled, a small, uncertain smile. She knew that she had to move forward, that she had to find a way to live with the memories, the pain, the sacrifice. But she didn't know how. She turned away from the house and walked through the gate, stepping out into the darkness, ready to face whatever the future held, but also filled with a sense of uncertainty and apprehension. She was alone, and she was forever changed. But what that change meant, she couldn't yet say. The end. Alternative ending, focus on the haunting, gently in the breeze. They seemed to be whispering names, her name, Michael's name, her parents' names. She shuddered, pulling her jacket tighter around her. She stopped at the gate, turning to look back at the house one last time. It stood silhouetted against the night sky, a dark and imposing figure. And she knew, with a chilling certainty, that it would always be there, in her mind, in her dreams, haunting her forever. A single tear rolled down her cheek, a tear of despair, of resignation, of utter and complete loneliness. She knew that she had freed Michael, but she had also condemned herself to a lifetime of carrying the weight of his sacrifice, the weight of her family's loss, the weight of the house itself. She smiled, a bitter, hollow smile. She knew that she could try to move forward, to build a new life, to find happiness. But she also knew that she would never truly escape the past. The ghosts would always be with her, whispering in her ear, reminding her of what she had lost, of what she had sacrificed. She turned away from the house and walked through the gate, stepping out into the darkness, ready to face a future filled with sorrow and regret. She was alone, and she would always be alone. For she was forever haunted. The end.